Kristallnacht, a night of anti-Jewish terror, occurred on November 9th and 10th, 1938, in Germany and Austria. Kristallnacht is a Nazi-inspired term meaning crystal night. Large amounts of shattered glass littered the streets of Germany and Austria following a government-directed attack against Jews, their homes, businesses, and synagogues. Kristallnacht marked the end of any hope for Jewish life in Germany. There was no place for Jews in the German economy. Jews were barred from all public places. All Jewish children were expelled from German schools. A once proud and productive community, which had endured for centuries, stood on the brink of extinction. The Nazis began a purge of Jews in the name of German racial purity and unity. The Jews were seen as satanic enemies, excluded from humanity. The assault against German Jewry began shortly after the Nazi takeover in January 1933. Government-sponsored anti-Semitic propaganda became widespread. Legislation was a chief form of persecution.
As things progressed, more and more you saw signs on stores, no Jews allowed. Signs went up on parks, no Jews allowed. No Jews and no dogs allowed. That was the comparison. As a matter of fact, from where we lived to the school, we had to go normally diagonally through two parks, and we had to go around it and had to walk considerably longer way in order to get to school.
Like once a week we had to pull the flag up and we sing the German anthem, you know, and I was asked to do it. So you do it, right? And just one of the SR men came by when I did that, and he took the flag and he hit my face left and right and says, "You dirty Jew, how can you pull our flag? You're contaminating it," and stuff like that.
I remember at one time we had to make a composition, and it said, quote, "Die Juden sind unser Unglück," and it means the Jews are bad luck. And I sat, and she told me why wasn't I writing, and I says, I couldn't possibly write that because I'm Jewish. And she says, you're going to remain here until you write that. And I sat and I sat and I sat, and finally my father came to get me.
Nearly 400 pieces of anti-Jewish legislation were eventually enacted, beginning with 42 in 1933. In 1935, the Nuremberg laws were passed, declaring Jews second-class citizens, forbidding marriage between Jews and non-Jews, and defining who was to be considered a Jew. As Nazi persecution grew, German Jews reacted by drawing closer together. As a community, they affirmed their Jewish identity and assisted young Jews in emigrating to Palestine. The year 1938 witnessed an acceleration of Jewish persecution in Germany. In June, 1,500 Jews were sent to concentration camps. In August, the main synagogue in the city of Nuremberg was demolished. The continued persecution caused many Jews to emigrate and many to lose their livelihood. However, some Jewish-owned businesses continued to exist. Many Jews were still reluctant to leave their homeland.
Even then, you know, you always had the hope. There was always. He was too much a German. He fought for the country. He was born in the country. They were in the country for generations. He didn't feel like leaving.
My father, being a lawyer and having been a veteran of World War I, was a very strong believer in justice in the German government and law and order in its finest sense, not in the derogatory sense we think of it today. And he, from what I gather, it was inconceivable to him that something permanent could happen in Germany that would cause us to have to leave. He was thoroughly a German patriot.
March 13, 1938, Austria was annexed to the Third Reich. Nazi violence and anti-Jewish legislation struck the Austrian Jewish community. In the fall of that year, as a result of a diplomatic victory at the Munich conference, Germany occupied the Sudetenland, a part of Czechoslovakia. As the Nazis expanded their power and prepared for war, they sought to make their entire Reich Judenrein, free of Jews. In October 1938, all non-naturalized Polish Jews in the Third Reich were deported. At first, Poland would not accept these thousands of deportees. Many were herded to the Polish frontier town of Zbęszyn. The Greenspan family were among the deported Polish Jews. They wrote to their son Herschel, who lived in Paris at the time, informing him of the abominable conditions in which the deported Jews were herded together. Herschel, distraught, entered the German embassy in Paris on November 7 and shot its third secretary, Ernst vom Rath. Following the shooting, the Nazis used the media to ignite a tense atmosphere. On November 9, 1938, vom Rath died. The Nazis had found their excuse. Kristallnacht, a reign of terror against German and Austrian Jews, was launched. During the night of November 9 and the next day, Nazi stormtroopers and SS-men broke into and looted Jewish homes, hospitals, and schools. Synagogues were set afire and pillaged.
Early in the morning, we heard commotions and screaming, "Let's kill the Jews, let's kill them all." And my mother said, "See what's going on, see what's going on." And I went on my bicycle the back way to the town square, and they had taken everything out of the synagogue and piled it high, and on top of it they had a Torah with the rabbi's habit and hat on, and they were burning it, and it was still dark, and I thought they were burning the rabbi, and I guess I got completely hysterical because I went home and I just screamed, "They're burning the rabbi, they're burning the rabbi." Well, they set the synagogue on fire, and it was in a very small area, and several other houses burned down. And I remember my mother saying that's Sinderschuld. A few houses further down was the rabbi's residence, and the rabbi had an old father-in-law living with him with a long beard and lovely old, everybody called him Grandpa. And they dragged him down the street in front of our house by the beard and everything, and the hair was coming out, and they were screaming and laughing about it, and look at the dirty Jew, look at the dirty Jew. And the rabbi, they had, I don't remember what it was, a club or something, they were hitting him and everything. I mean, it was just absolutely a nightmare. Later on we found out that naturally all the businesses had been destroyed. The synagogue was burned to the ground, like I say, with some other buildings and so on. And there was, all the men had been, my father was the only man, adult man left in town.
That I got a call, and it was already morning hours, about 4:30 o'clock in the morning, when I got a call. It was the president of our congregation, and I was also in the board as treasurer. I should come right away to the synagogue. The synagogue is on fire. Now he didn't know what one could see it. The sky was lit already, and so I got dressed real quick and ran. Took me only maybe 5 minutes to run to the synagogue. And as I came close, I saw there was no hope. It was already, from the inside, everything was going up in flames. It's something you can't forget.
I was hit on the head by somebody, and I turned around. There was like a short man, not much taller than I am, middle-aged. I was young at the time, so I started to run, and I could outrun him, and I was lucky. But he hit me hard because I had felt a pain for several days, that I remember. And I escaped, and I hid in a building. There was an old-age home. And after I was hiding behind the door, the people were sitting around. They asked me to leave because they were afraid they might be accused of sheltering me.
Right across the street was a very large old-age home where at least I would say today 200 to 250 elderly people, men and women, lived in there. It was a religious place. They had a little synagogue inside where they could say their prayers every day. Some SS and SR men came there in the afternoon, went into the building, routed all the people together, got them out on the street. After most of them were out on the street, mostly, I would say, the people were on average age between 70 and 80, men and women. They went in, they cleaned out the synagogue, took out all the prayer books, prayer shawls, and the Torah scrolls, threw it all out on the street on one pile, lit it up, made a big fire, danced around it, and they had a real ball there. And the elderly men in this particular home mostly were long beards. They came with scissors, cut off their beards, danced around them, took their heads off their skull caps and threw it all in the fire, and made had a real celebration there.
Although Kristallnacht was portrayed as a spontaneous response to von Rath's assassination, it was clear that it was planned and coordinated by the German government.
We had the feeling right away, everybody, that this was government instigated, and you did not see any Nazis in uniform at that point. They were all in civilian clothes, but they were mostly this type of people that were swarming around the synagogue and doing their work.
Apart from some individual acts of humanity and some incidents of brutality, Germans at large responded with apathy or fear. The results of Kristallnacht were devastating. 7,000 Jewish shops and businesses were looted or destroyed. Nearly 100 Jews were killed and hundreds injured. There were many suicides, and 30,000 Jewish males were sent to concentration camps.
We didn't know where we were going. Nobody told us a thing. At about 4 o'clock in the early morning hours, the train stopped, and immediately we heard commandos. They opened the doors, and just instinctively everybody rushed out. In fact, I jumped out because as it turned out to be the SS concentration camp guards were already waiting for us. And those who could not get out fast enough, older people, they were just yanked out of the train cars. And immediately we were lined up there as much as we could see, and had to run. Wherever it was, we didn't know until we reached a huge gate which we could distinguish in the darkness. And as we came close enough, we saw the sign on top of that gate that said concentration camp Sachsenhausen. So we knew that where we had landed.
We really saw a lot of death from the camps. See, that was in winter.
On November 12, 1938, a fine of 1 billion marks was levied against the Jews for the assassination of von Rath. The Jews were forced to repair the damage from Kristallnacht at their own expense and clear away the rubble.
But probably the most vivid recollection I have of that time is day by day watching Jewish laborers dismantle the synagogue brick by brick, because the synagogue next door to the school was being torn down, and that was all being done by Jewish labor. And the fact that it was the perversity of the Nazis to employ Jewish labor to do this. Bad enough that they tore down the synagogue, but they had to rub it in.
There were protests from the foreign press over Kristallnacht and some efforts to aid the victims. Generally, though, the nations of the world did little or nothing to pressure the Nazis to cease their persecution or to offer refuge to the Jews. In the panic that followed Kristallnacht, most Jews tried desperately to emigrate.
The tragedy was that instead of opening borders and gates for the Jews, they were locked. The doors were actually locked. And even United States, with all the humanitarian ideals, could not or did not want to do anything more than their regular immigration policies permitted them to do.
Kristallnacht resulted not only in shattered glass, but in the shattered lives within a once thriving Jewish community.
It shattered our entrenched illusion of security, of roots. That was gone. I mean, up till that time, we felt like, you know, we could stay and we will stay and it will end. That was it. That shattered our dreams.
To me, it was a total collapse of everything that I had believed in, that was home. Home wasn't there. Without my father, was nothing. The hatred, the rejection, the disaster. It was a nightmare. It still is a nightmare.
I felt at this time strongly that was the beginning of the end. I think being a child, you only react. You can never act on your own, and so you can only feel, you know, something. And I think this total numbness which came over me was sort of the indication that I felt there's really not much hope for us in Germany anymore, and we just have to endure and get out. I felt that childhood was no longer for me. It was totally taken away from me.
The personal mark it left is that, of course, I can never trust people fully, let's put it this way, because in the event everybody looks after their own interests.
It meant the end of self-deception.
If I live to be 1,000, I will never forget that day, never.
Following Kristallnacht, the Jews in the Third Reich fell under control of the SS. The SS would eventually become the instrument of genocide, which resulted in the annihilation of millions. Kristallnacht demonstrated the murderous potential of anti-Semitism and an arrogant disregard for human rights. Instead of safeguarding its people, a government directed and encouraged violence against them. Kristallnacht is a travesty which must never be forgotten.
It meant for all of us the beginning of the end. We knew that we were finished in Germany. What we didn't know, or what you couldn't imagine, was what would follow afterwards, that this would be possible. To get thrown out, to lose all of your earthly belongings, 300-400 year history of being part of a country, of knowing that your father served in the German army, that we were good citizens. All of this was a fact by then. Now we have a new home in America that will never happen again. And I have children, I have grandchildren, and that is what we have to watch out for, that it cannot happen again. Not to the Jewish people, and not to any other people.